Where we left off on Wednesday, where we were in a side control position. I told you this happens from a lot of different angles, but we attacked him the other way, okay? And then what I did was I told you that we were attacking an arm bar, but there was a reason why we attacked the arm bar at the angle, and I'll explain it really quick. So we were here in a side control position, or maybe we were north and south, or some form of this, and I wanted to press the action because either I needed a submission, or I like to play the game that I'm looking for submissions and not just holding a person in a static hold like side control. So I was aggressively attacking. I told you there's a bunch of different ways. I told you one that you could take your hands from this position and drop it, control the wrist line, and then drop this, and you got a double Y wedge, and you're pushing this thing out so that when he comes and saves it, I cupped his elbow, I took a step over, and then I told you, listen, at this point, you know what? If you really got to go for this, you got to catch this arm now, because now you're going to start fiddling and dropping, and there's a point when they're looking the other way that if he was a good player and I aggressively try to open up this pocket, at some point I got to drop the bottom elbow. There's nothing you can do about it. So then when I come in here and drop, he's up, and now I got to transfer up here and then try to take him back or try to capture him before he comes up and turtle. So then I told you, okay, I told you a different way to do it. I said, okay, maybe I couldn't push him out because he was so big, and I come in here and I'm trying, and I told you, listen, you could do this two different ways. We could do it nasty in the beginning, or we could kind of like disguise it a little bit. But I told you I told you a couple of different ways. You could either force the action, or I could grab the wrist and I could put my kneecap on his jawline. And now when I windshield wiper, you're coming over no matter what size you are, because I don't care how big you are. Your neck muscles are not that strong, and I can drive that kneecap, and you can be much smaller than the person and manipulate that skull line, because you should never get control of a person's skull line. But can't do anything about it. I'm making him go that way, okay? So no matter what, he's going that way. So I could do it from here, and I told you in a north-south position, maybe you don't want to be that mean to your partner, and then you're going to get different players that sit on the bottom, and one that will think that he had this victory because he sat there and moved like 2 inches and didn't get submitted. And in his mind, for whatever reason, he thinks that that was like a win, which is the dumbest thing in the world, because your face would have got mutilated, like. And if he was really playing it nasty, he would have made you turn. But he let you sit there like that because he wanted to play nice with you. So I told you, listen, you don't have to do it at that point. You just have to be understanding in what I'm describing right now. I'm describing a guy that thinks that this is some type of victory to sit here and just move 2 inches and not try to recover. So at this point, this person's not really trying to recover, and I want to submit him, right? So I'm going to go vertical with this. So instead of being here, I'm going to put my hands on opposite sides, and I'm just coming up. And I'm looking for whatever the top hand is. If the hands are like this, doesn't matter, but sometimes it'll be like this, okay? So what I'm looking to do is put my shin on one side of this. So if this is the position, this is a player that's he's not trying to recover. So I'm going to start aggressively dropping this inside, right, so that I can get him to come up. Now remember the equation. I played them, did a bunch of different ways, and I explained why I did what I did. So that one to the jawline, if this guy wants to play this like this, I don't have a problem with you doing it in class to the jawline, because I hate this. Because it's not real, and it's so fake, and it's like not, we're part of the same team, man. You should be fighting. You should be fighting to recover. You should be fighting to like get a better position. It's like reflective of life. You just sit there and settle for that. That's awful. Okay, so I described a whole bunch of different things of why so we're going to bring him that way, okay? And then I described to you what happened when he came up to turtle, because I had to drop that elbow line. So when he comes up, I told you, that's how we left at the last class. I said that you were going to go for a rear insertion where it's almost like this reverse Kimura, but there's no Kimura, so it can't be a reverse Kimura. It is a hold where the hands are opposite. So a Kimura would be this, me grabbing, everybody knows this, and I finish it this way. I'm the other way right now, so it's not realistic. I know early in the people's BJJ careers, they'll try to finish somebody like this. I'm not pulling this hand back. I'm pushing with this, so I'm inserting backwards. So when he came up at that angle, whatever, we're just going to say we were just doing this simple. I drove this thing down. I captured this elbow. At any point, if he always overdrives, I can lift his hand. I'm going to catch that elbow. So he came up, and I didn't want him making a full rotation. So I'm going to try to stay up so everybody can see. We're playing a player that's going to bottle up. And I also right? I would have loved to come in, but he's a good player, and I know if I drop that elbow line, he's coming up turtle. So I told you to insert backwards. This opening is always going to be here, okay? So if I was sitting here on a knee pinch and I'm covering him, I'm going in backwards, almost like you're doing a rear naked choke under a person's neck. I'm going to get my hand through. So now when I get my hand through, I'm sitting here on a knee pinch, and this is where we left off, okay? I got to sit back and take this arm now, right? But I got to transfer, and this is where we left off, okay? I told you in the last class, you're going to lock up this grip, okay? So all I'm doing is releasing, but I'm staying on this side of the equation. And I told you at this point, there were two things I cared about right now, is owning this elbow line to this side of the hip so that I eliminate the hitchhiker as much as I can. Secondly is I don't want him curling up into me and then stacking me. So I told you there should be no separation of your inner thigh to his face. I want to control the jawline. It's the same principle in many regards. It's from half guard, side control. It just even was right now when I told you should never get a shin line to his chin because now you're going to manipulate his turns. So the same principle, I don't really let go of this. So if I'm sitting here, if you focus on this, when I sit back, I never let go of that face, right? I only cared about curling as deep down there as possible because I want to shelve this elbow line, okay? Because that later could be one of his escapes if he tries to do. So I want to be on a deep shelf. So when I'm sitting back here, I'm trying my best to keep it on this side because I don't want to lose this and have to chase him on a stack the other way. I got great control right now. So as I told you to sit back this way and release, it's for a reason because I want to take this leg out. And I want to get control of that far side elbow, but I'm owning this arm right now. And I'm doing my best to get control so I can transfer my hands. I'm not going to tell you how to transfer your hands right now. We went through this in detail, a bunch of stuff the other day. What I cared about is you learning that sequence, and you could do it either way, and I'd love to be able to add to it. So you're going to bring him up. As he's coming up, I'm learning how to follow him. Okay, the moment I come in, I go backwards. Okay, if you want to practice the other one, you can, but I'm going to ask you, shelve tight. Okay, don't let go of the elbow line. As you shelf, if you're going to go into a regular Kimura, as you shelf, okay, you were here on the shelf, I go re-shelf. I want to be able to take his back if things go wrong. I also want to be able to drop this elbow and follow to the back side on either quadrant. So be specific on why I shelf. If for some reason I lose that elbow. So I re-shelf and I go in the other way, okay? Once you grab on, do not stay here. Don't stay here like this and think you're doing this and he's a big player and he's coming up the turtle and now you're going to be late to transfer up here if you needed to run him back down the line. So understand where you are. The moment this drops and you come in here, you better leverage yourself this way because now I got to chase him a different way. So now as I go gripping my hands, now I'm on this side of the equation. Now I start basing myself up to come up, okay? You can do either one. We're going to recapture before we add. Let's partner up, please. Let's do it. So I want to go through things of failure because that's really what you always have to prepare for. It's almost like the same thing as like people who try to get attacks and try to elevate somebody, but they're not even practice any form of really good guard defense. So it starts with it starts with you understanding the sequences and how he moves and how I have to transfer. And then the same thing with the guard stuff. So let's say I come in here and I've done all of these things, and then there's going to be different levels of this. When you're pushing this guy down, right, there's some things that are happening that I pointed out to some, but I see a bunch of people doing it. Let's just go through something. He comes like this, and now I'm over here and I capture this. I see some people sitting over this back shoulder. Do your best to come back to here, right? And I know it looks weird in the beginning, but let's say I come like this. I'm sitting back, right, and I'm coming like this, and then maybe he curls this way, turn this way, and okay, so I follow him up and I start coming over the top and transferring, but as long as I'm sitting up there, I have opportunities to follow him again, and if he goes the other way, I can follow him that way also. But sit up here, okay? Try your best, is your best to sit up here because I want to be able to control the skull and I want to be able to sit up here that I'm following where I am, like I'm perched, ready to go that way or this way. But that's not how we're going right now. So I was just describing, so try your best not to fall sideways. You're falling up here on this top quadrant. When he comes up here, okay, and you're like this, and there's times I'm going to tell you at this point, I've seen this happen where the guy over-rotates, comes up, and you're like this, and now you pull your body out, and you shouldn't have been here. Because now I'm totally inefficient. I don't even have anything. I'm like, this should have been very frustrating to you on the turn of where you ended up at this point. When you were like this, okay, for whatever reason, he overturns. Leverage yourself out. So do your best to leverage yourself all the way out, because if I've leveraged myself out as aggressive as possible, I'm also stopping the rotation of that, taking that shoulder out. I mean, the retraction of this elbow line, because I want to see if I can collect him again. So leverage yourself out. There were a few people on Wednesday that did that. I watched, so I don't want to point out who it was, but that happened a couple of times where they stayed and they lost and they stayed on top. You don't have anything at that point. Leverage yourself out, because I want to be able to watch this backside. So we were here, and let's start adding stuff to this. So you were here, you pushed this out, you collected this elbow, and he's coming up, right? So I want to be able to rotate here where I'm leveraged out, but I'm going to ask you to do two different ones now. If for some reason he comes up, okay, I shouldn't be here at this point, okay? So I'm going to ask you, I got to retract this, because your foot position's like this, and if he bites onto this elbow, Mr. Jason Perez has made a living at this roll, okay? So if for some reason, we'll do two different ones at this point, I would have loved to have re-snaked inside and now get my hand position, and now I can start flipping my hips and dominating him and bringing him over. So I'm going to ask you to do that one. If you've never done it before, I'll show it again, okay? But for some reason, he comes up and you tried to stay here, right? So you're like this. And now he's coming up and he's biting on the hand. I drop and I flare right away. Don't worry about your next position on this, okay? The only thing I cared about was you having a knee line higher than his hip line, because I know what he's going to do. He's going to shoulder roll you right now, okay? So I want to be able to end up on the other side with this hip landing first, okay? So the moment he's here, so the bottom player, I just told you before, you should have been leveraged all the way over. Whether it be this grip or that grip, I should have been full body on this side holding that position, okay? But I asked you to come up, and I asked you for the first one. He's coming up, and you just got your hands together, okay? So on this guy, I'm going to ask you to do it gently. You could do it live if you want. I'm going to ask you to do your best to control the back of the spinal cord. It's almost like a quarter Nelson, that I have either the form of my bicep or I have some form of my front deltoid sitting behind here. My only goal is to put his forehead between his biceps, okay? So this is where I was. I only focus on it. When I tell you don't focus on your body, don't focus on your hip turns, your foot, focus on this. This is your goal, okay? This stubby here, mechanically I can adjust this later to show you how to generate more power, but this is your goal, okay? So your goal is, I just told you to put his forehead between his shoulders, okay? So if I was aggressively doing that, he would have somersaulted over, okay? I don't pay attention to my lower half. That we will find later. I pay attention to that, okay? So I'm going to ask you to flip him over and take his back. On the second one, I'm going to ask you, so he was turning that way, and I'm going to ask you to do what I just said, is that my knee line, the moment he bites onto my hand, my knee line flips and comes higher than his hip, okay? So if I was here, this is where I was. I pushed this line, I collected this elbow, and he's coming up, and I'm leveraged all the way over and trying to figure out if I can get insertion, but he comes up too quick, and he bites on. And I flare, and I just pick. I don't think anything else. So when Ethan shoulder rolls me, this is where we are. We're coming all the way over on the neckline to the other side, okay? It'll be there all the time for you. I'm going to ask you at this point, I would love to be able to bite on and really own him. So with this trailing leg, the other leg, I just cared about being higher than your hip. So then we go over, I'm not bottom player. Mr. Jason Perez literally lays on everybody. I mean, he does it in every roll, okay? So I'm not trying to pick on him because he does it really well. And he sets you up. I'll tell you how he sets you up. So you think he's going to turn in. He doesn't. He turns in a little bit. You make some separation. And then he bullets out the other way. And he bites on. And that's how, and then you go for the roll, okay? So whatever it is, he bites on. So right away, my hip line is higher than his. So as he's coming up, okay, all I cared about was this. So when the shoulder roll happens, this is my secondary leg. I would love to be able to bite onto the inside of his quad as we're going over. So I bury with him. So my right leg right now keeps pulling so that we end up on the other side. I'm already on the neckline, ready to finish. Okay, so I'm going to ask you to do both. If you want to do the third, then give me the setup and finish the Kimura. Okay, so then the second one would be you getting your hand positions and dominating the skull and rotating them over. But this time he came up too quick. And he bit on, and my hand position ideally, okay, what's happening, come up for a second. What ideally, right, so let's bring your headline up like this. Ideally, I would be long with this hook and short with this guy, so there would be no bite over here. And now I got opportunities to get under this throat, collar, chokes, and stuff. That's where I would love to be. But because you were sitting so far, and I want to paint this story, because you leverage yourself so far over the top, I'm not going to have this opportunity to be short with this guy over here. But I'm going to have an opportunity to connect here and then dominate skull line up here. But I also understand the sacrifice I just gave up, that I leverage myself so far over the top that I'm looking to see if I can recapture this hand and step it back over. So I'm watching what's occurring. But he's coming up, and I'm dropping elbow and trying to put my hands together, but he just bit on. Okay, so that now I know I'm going over. My feet are in the wrong position anyway. Let's say right here, if my hands were, pick your head up a second. If my hands were to get connected anyway, and now I told you to dominate skull line, for me to generate power and force is what I told you we could refine later, I would still have to flip my hip this way to generate power this way. So my knee line position should have flipped anyway, right? Because if my knee line position flipped for me to dominate, then this line was sitting here because I really want to be close to the mat with the turn. But this line was sitting here that I just needed to elevate slightly because he just bit on. And now we're going for the roll. I don't care about the secondary leg. I just want to be behind you with hooks facing up, right? So if for some reason we were here and I just told you what happened in the story, that he bit on, I'm going, oh boy. And as we're coming, even if I miss this hook, I'd rather be here where I'm behind you, right? And maybe I don't get my forward, but it's not me laying on top like this. Go over, right, like this, and then go like this. And now Jay's a big guy. He does to everybody. He peels their hand and refaces them. Okay, so we could do all three, right? Or if you just want to focus on one, it's somewhere that you get a lot. I'm going to ask you to understand what we're doing, right, in a bigger story, because I painted a lot of stories and why things happen when they happen. Try your best to leverage yourself over if you're a smaller player, because there's no danger in this. If you're getting into this habit that he's coming up, I shouldn't be here. I have nothing at this point. I'm leveraged over because if something goes wrong and I don't like this up here and he pulls that elbow back, big deal. I'm already on that back hip already. So you could own this and I can keep coming, no big deal, right? So if I wanted to play this game sitting back here on the top quad and the back quad, who cares? All right, so you'll leverage for a reason. I just told you multiple stories of why. So let's partner up and do it. Let's do it, guys. This stuff is geared towards a different level in the room, one with a little bit more experience or one that comes really often. So I could speak to them a little bit different because they know patterns and stuff. So I can't correct everything, but if I can just point a couple of things out for you. I describe things in very specific patterns because your memory has to go to that pattern at that given time. So I'm very particular about it. You know when I was telling you to push this arm out, but he's already coming up, and you're like this, and you're all off, right? This is just minor. When you're coming here and he's turning, I'm retracting, right? Because I want to be able to shelf, but I also want to give myself a second that if he comes up too quick, maybe I transfer now, right? But once he comes and turns, like he's not saving the arm. So I see people with this arm down here, you should have been pulling back because that thing's going to be wedged on the floor and you don't know how big he is because I would love to be all the way in here, right? So I don't know. So the moment I go push out, I pull back the moment he makes the turn too. The moment I can get backside control with a wedge, I got to pull back. And I also want to pull back for a reason that when he comes up, my distance on this is short to recapture my hand position. Number two is when he comes up, I see some people, they make this grip like this, right? And then they're trying to just bring this guy over like this, and now he falls with you. You're not getting a guy over that outweighs you by 50, 60 pounds in a high-level black. It's my hips at the end. So I know I'm telling you to drive the skull, but you're working as one motor unit. Your whole body is one goal, is to put that head between that. So why would I be here, where I'm going to give up about 40% of my body line here? My body somehow has to get up here, because when I rotate my hips, it's my secondary leg that'll finish it off. Right now my hips are facing the mat. Good, I'll stay light with this. As I'm turning this line, stay with me, up, stay up for me. As I'm turning my hip lines over, this back leg at some point, as we make the turn, will thrust off to make the finish turn on it. So if I'm here dominating his skull line, as I'm making this turn over the top, I want to be able to push off this secondary leg that I'm throwing him, otherwise he's going to get really hurt. I want to give him almost this sensation that he's getting like a shock treatment up the spinal cord line. He'll tell you right now, the way I did it right now, if I go live with it, you'll hear the yelp. You'll, ah! Like it feels like a whiplash. It's very violent. So if you never had one done, oof, you don't want John Danaher to do it to you. It's like vicious, man. But it happens from here. So don't put your headline here. The only one that had success, and I'm not a fan of it, is Leo Vieira used to do that one, where you're here and now he does a jump over. But then I'm not a fan of it, because then, you know, if he goes flat on you, you got to be able to suck yourself back up and then recap, like, man, you're going to make that sacrifice, and then I'm only going to have about 20% of the room that could do it, because they're so good with their grips, they exercise, and they're tight, and they're athletic. That's not, you're going to go somersaulting over, and he goes planking flat, and now you're trying to bring yourself back. Get out of here. This is going to go south on you. So Leo Vieira is great at it, but I'm not a fan of it, because, you know, I teach the whole room. So those are just little things for when we do these practices and stuff, that you practice that stuff. And then last thing is, I see some people that don't do the proper sequences on the grip. They just mesh it. Like, oh my God, you would never get anywhere at the highest level if you just mesh it. Your patterns are very specific, because you're only as strong as your weakest link. So if you consistently do these patterns like this, go back for a second, that you're like this, and you push this arm out, and now he comes and turns, and you come in like this, and now you're grabbing the elbow? Hell no, he just left you. You didn't understand the story from the very beginning. He just left you. So my first reaction is, once I push, I'm looking for that elbow, but once he makes the turn to get the back, I'm pulling back. And if I don't follow those patterns, you're not capturing a high-level guy. You're just not. You're just going to be here a long time, and you're not going to understand the patterns, okay? So do your best when I tell the patterns. They're very specific for every reason. If you forget, just ask me. Okay, if you want to grab water, mouth guard, ear guards, we go live in 2.